And welcome to day 30 of the Atlantic Hurricane season, June the 30th, 2013. It's day 48 in the Eastern Pacific, where we still have Invest 96E, which now has a very high chance of development, though having said that, it did last night, but it's even higher this evening, near 100% chance of becoming a tropical cyclone in the next 48 hours. And we also have Tropical Storm Rumbia rumbling through the Philippines at the moment as a tropical storm. Currently warnings in effect there for the northern parts of the Philippines at the moment. The Philippine name, of course, is Gorio for that storm. Post-tropical storm Cosme is still going as well, but not much left of that one now, so that's not very interesting. Of course, we have Invest 96E, which will be our next storm in the Eastern Pacific, almost certainly now, as it moves towards the north, and it could pose a bit of a threat to the Mexican coastline. We'll have to watch that one fairly closely. In the Atlantic Ocean, things are still fairly quiet. That tropical wave near the Lesser Antilles has been highlighted as a near 0% chance of development. Hasn't even been designated as an invest, so certainly not likely to form with that one. And the Indian Ocean remains quiet with no new invests or any areas of development or disturbances that appear to be of any threat at the moment. Looking at the sea surface temperatures then, the Eastern Pacific has boiled off slightly but remains fairly warm, around 30 degrees near the coastlines as well of Central America. In the Gulf of Mexico, things are certainly warming up here. The northern half now, around 30 degrees Celsius waters, and elsewhere is certainly warm enough to support a tropical storm. And in the South China Sea and the Philippine region, warm waters around here as well, which will certainly aid Rumbia in the Western Pacific as it moves towards the northwest. And here it is right now, currently with winds of 45 miles per hour despite all the land interaction, with a pressure of 993 millibars. Positions currently 14.2 north at 121.3 east as of midnight, June 30th, and it's now expected to move towards the northwest as a tropical storm, intensifying over the South China Sea and then striking China as a high-end tropical storm in around 48 hours' time. It's almost moved free of the Philippines now, at least the centre of the storm has, but of course warnings are still in effect. Signal 2 warnings, that's 40 to 60 mile per hour winds for large parts of southern and central Luzon and Mimaropa region as well of Philippines, and signal 1 warnings for a little bit of a wider area as well towards the north and south of those areas, and that's for winds of up to 40 miles per hour sustained. And of course this storm in particular, with it being a fairly weak one, is probably going to be more noted for the rainfall, so there could be heavy rainfall and flooding already occurring as well in some areas, so that's certainly one to be very wary of. Invest 96E then is expected to become a tropical storm fairly soon and move off to the northwest. The model's still differing slightly, and we'll come onto the models very soon, but a near 100% chance of this storm forming. Currently 30 mile per hour winds, 1007 millibars in pressure. In the Eastern Pacific, here's what's been going on. This is the satellite imagery in the past 24 hours or so. You can see the remnants of Cosme moving off to the east there as a post-tropical cyclone, and Invest 96E creeping into the bottom right of the screen there. You can actually see it when that black mass of area isn't there. Once actually showing the satellite imagery, you can see it forming over there. And here we have the Western Pacific, where we have Rumbia moving through the Philippines over the past 24 hours. You can see how it's moved through, and the storm is developing off to the western side of the Philippines lately, and that's where most of the worst part of the storm will now be located as it moves off to the northwest. Certainly seems to be developing not that inhibited by all the land interaction at the moment. Looking at the models then, the CMC model, what you can see of it anyway, has the new storm in the Eastern Pacific moving off to the northwest, and then back to the southeast as it dissipates, and perhaps a little system behind that at the end it was hinting at possibly. The ECMWF model predicts a rather broad system moving off to the northwest, perhaps a little bit of a Cosme but weaker in terms of storms to compare it to perhaps, as it moves towards the northwest, not likely to affect the Mexican coastline according to that one. The GFS takes it fairly close, you can see it there, not too far from the coast at all, might trigger some tropical storm watches or warnings along the Mexican coastline, and then it's expected to move off to the perhaps west-southwest. The NavGem model fairly similar but a weaker system as it moves towards the northwest, and perhaps a little bit of a stall near the Mexican coastline towards the southwest, and then finds itself again and moves towards the northwest at the end of that one. The GFDL model takes it pretty close to the coastline of Mexico as a tropical storm, perhaps a minimal hurricane, before moving for stalling off the Mexican coastline, then moving towards the southwest. And the HWRF model, fairly similar but less dilly-dallying around the Mexican coastline and moving towards the southwest and then eventually westward as a tropical storm, probably not a hurricane according to that one. Looking at the overall predicted season scores, since the storm in the Eastern Pacific hasn't yet formed, no scores have changed. So the top three remain as: in first place, Ken with 102, Typhoon Bopa in second with 93, and Hurricane Melissa 20 in third place with 91 points at the moment. And that may change tomorrow with a new storm forming in the Eastern Pacific, which is very likely at this stage. You can submit your own storm totals at the Force 13 website. Now is a better time than any time, I suppose, by visiting the interactive section. 2013 Predictor Season button should be available, and you should find it fairly easily. And then you can click through and do all the submission, and it'll be put up on the leaderboard in due course. So what happened on this day then, on June the 30th, the last day of June of course, 1976, Tropical Depression 4 made landfall near Salina Cruz, Mexico, and dissipated. Hurricane Celia dissipated in the Eastern Pacific in 1986. Tropical Depression 5 dissipated in the Eastern Pacific also in 1991, and in 1994 Tropical Storm Alberto, the first storm formed near Cuba of that year in 1994, that was pictured there. In 1997, Tropical Storm Anna formed in the Atlantic, that's pictured as well at peak intensity there. Tropical Storm Peter turned post-tropical in the same day in the Western Pacific. In 1998, Hurricane Blas dissipated in the Eastern Pacific, and in 2001, Tropical Storm Utor formed in the Western Pacific, that one's pictured as well at near its peak intensity as it moved towards the near the Philippines, I believe it was. Tropical Storm Bill made landfall in Louisiana in 2003. Tropical Storm Erinia formed in the Western Pacific in 2006. And in 2012, last year, Tropical Storm Doc Shuri dissipated over China on this day, on June the 30th. Of course, the last day of June. July is upon us, and we'll probably see a little bit more going on in the Western Pacific on this day as that gets a little bit warmer. And in the Atlantic, of course, things really warm up in August and September in the Atlantic. But don't forget, you can track any storm that forms, including the ones that we have already, on the website force13.com/storm tracking is the main storm tracking page, which has the overview with the tables at the top and the bottom which show which storms are active and which warnings are currently in effect, and of course the map showing what's going on. And then you can click through more in depth if you wish, basin by basin, to see what's going on in each area. The storm tracking maps which show where the storm's expected to go and what intensity over the next 5 days, and of course any warning information as that becomes relevant. And obviously that is relevant in the Philippines at the moment, where we have signal 1 and 2 warnings in effect at the moment for parts of the northern Philippines. And don't forget, you can visit the social pages, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Force 13 is on all of those. You can fire off a comment and show your support by subscribing, liking, favouriting and commenting, and anything else that you may well think of. On the YouTube channel, you can comment on there, and I monitor that fairly frequently, so if you have any questions, I'll come back with a reply if that is deemed necessary. There'll be another weather bulletin, number 32, that'll be coming up tomorrow, July the 1st, at around midnight UTC, and there'll probably be updates during the day on June the 30th, because I'm back to normal in my real life affairs. So there'll be updates on both storms, Rumbia and the new one in the Eastern Pacific, if that forms during the day on June the 30th. But that's it for the time being.